Hi friends, it's Lisa Hetrick, illustrator for Gina K Designs, and I'm so grateful you could join me today. I have a fun card project to share with you today that uses watercolor, and it's kind of what I'm calling washy, drippy watercolor. And I'm using only two watercolor paints for this project. And I'm using one of my favorite greens that kind of turns into a bit of a turquoise. And it also creates a lot of different textures for this card project. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the stamps and the supplies that I'm going to be using for today's project. So the stamp set that I'm going to use is the Free to Flourish stamp set. This is my new stamp set with Gina K Designs. I'm going to use this interesting curved leaf element, and I'm going to use the Happiness Blooms from Within sentiment and the little daisy element. I also have the coordinating die set, and I'm going to use the daisy die to cut out the dies that we're going to be using for embellishments for this card. Okay, so a quick look at all the other supplies that I have here. I have a round brush. I have the Marvy Uchida Jewel Picker. I've got some purple tape and some tacky tape. I love using the tacky tape with watercolor paper. It works so well. I have the Embossing and Watermark ink from Gina K Designs, and I'm also using the Obsidian Amalgam ink. I have two paints here. I've got Cascade Green from Daniel Smith, and I also have a gold metallic watercolor pan here. You can use any kind of gold metallic that you have in your stash. I'm using a little bit of multimedia matte to adhere my sequins and embellishments, and I'm using the Emerald City sequins because they're just so pretty and they're going to be really great accent piece for the card. I have a pair of scissors and my round comfort grip block. I love that block. It's my super fave and I use it all the time. I've got a bottle of water here that we're going to use for the drippy watercolor effects. So let's go ahead and talk about the paper that I'm going to be using for today's project. I have some watercolor paper here, and I'm using the Arteza 100% cotton cold press watercolor paper. The B Paper Company paper that I love so much has been really difficult to find, so this is a fantastic alternative. I've got it cut to 4 by 5 1/4. I'm also using a piece of Tranquil Teal from Gina K Designs. I love this color. It's cut to an A2 size card, and I have a piece of scrap watercolor paper for the daisy embellishments. I've also got some Gina K Designs black embossing powder, and I have it here in this little container here we're going to be using for today's project. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to get started with creating the pattern using the leaf element in the stamp set, and I'm going to create this kind of vine-like pattern that starts in the lower left-hand corner but works its way up the card. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up the stamp with the embossing ink, and I'm going to apply the black embossing powder immediately. So I am going to create this pattern with each leaf element one at a time. When you're working with watercolor, I have found that it can be challenging to stamp out all of your elements and then add the embossing powder because it kind of starts to dry out. So I have found that this method works really well with watercolor paper. I'm just heating up my heat tool, and you can see that I'm moving on to doing each image one at a time. Now, I didn't use the anti-static powder bag for this embossing project. I tend to not use it a lot, and with watercolor paper, I like that extra little bit of embossing powder that just shows up in different places. It adds to the texture and dimension of this project, and you're going to see how it's really going to work with the watercolor drippies that we're going to be doing. So you can see that I'm just doing one at a time and kind of creating this vine-like look with this stamped image, and I'm just loving the way it looks. These two little leaves are really whimsical and they've got a nice flow to them, and I'm just kind of creating this little shape that's kind of flowing from the bottom of the left-hand corner of the cardstock all the way up to the top. And it's just creating a really nice flow and pattern for this card. So I'm just wrapping up that last one, and I'm moving on to stamping the daisy embellishments. And I'm just going to go ahead and stamp them out 3 times. I'm going to eventually cut these out with the die, the coordinating die, but I'm just getting them all stamped out so that we can move on to getting drippy with watercolor. And this is my favorite part of the whole project. So I'm going to create some texture and dimension and some drippy drips with watercolor. I've got Daniel Smith Cascade Green here. Now, this green is such a great color from the Daniel Smith line. It's not going to come out like a traditional green. It has 2 pigments in it, so when the color dries, it also granulates, so we get a little bit of extra texture, but we get these turquoise like blue hues that come out of this watercolor. And it coordinates so well with the Tranquil Teal in the Gina K Designs line. So I love it. Okay, so I sprayed my cardstock and then I dropped in the Cascade Green, and you can see that I'm doing the drippy part right now. So watercolor goes wherever the water is. So I'm just tipping the cardstock up and back just to kind of get that drippy effect going. And you can see this Cascade Green. You can see some of the blues that are starting to come out of this color. And I'm going to coax this watercolor down a little bit. I'm painting in some water so that I can get that watercolor to just flow right into the drips. Okay, so now I'm adding some of the gold, and I'm just dropping that gold metallic into the wet areas, just right on top of that Cascade Green. And I'm going to coax it down and just get it to drip down off of the cardstock. So I'm just tilting the paper, and the watercolor is going to flow where the water goes. So the more drips, if I want to create more drips, and I'm going to do that right here, I'm just going to add a little bit more water below this big honkin' drip here so that I can get it to coax its way down. So you can see that it'll coax its way down to the bottom of the paper because I've created that channel of water for it to flow into. Watercolor goes wherever the water is. So you can pretty much coax your watercolor anywhere on your paper and get this drippy effect. Now you can start to see how the blues are starting to come out. Oh, they are gorgeous, and how that gold and that Cascade Green blend so well together. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on and paint the daisy embellishments, and I just added some water to the paper, and I'm just dropping in that Cascade Green, and then I'm going to go ahead in and drop that gold metallic color into the top of the daisies. And I'm going to just grab my heat tool and just kind of dry those daisies up before I add the dye, the daisy dye on top. And I'm going to run this through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 and just cut those 3 daisies out. And they're going to be our final embellishments for the card. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. Now that the card base is dry, you can see that the watercolor really fades back. So we put quite a bit of watercolor on there, but I'm going to go back in and layer a little bit more of that Cascade Green. And this technique would be called wet on dry. So my brush is wet, the pigment in the watercolor is wet, but the paper is dry. So I'm just adding a little bit of that color on top, I'm going to add a little bit of gold in a couple strategic places here, just to add another layer of gold. These two colors just blend so well together. That Cascade green, because it granulates, we get all of those turquoise blue hues that are coming out and mixing with the greens. I just love this color so much. It's just going to look so pretty with the Tranquil Teal card base. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to stamping the sentiment. And here are the 3 embellishments, the 3 daisy embellishments that I cut out. They're just so pretty. They're going to be great accent embellishments. I've got my mini mister here, and I'm just going to put the whole base inside of the mini mister. And I'm going to pull the Happiness Blooms from Within sentiment, just kind of nest that down in this lower third. Right here on the card front, and just close my door here. I'm going to use the Obsidian Amalgam ink, and I'm going to stamp this down onto the watercolor paper 3 times. I have found that with 100% cotton watercolor paper, has a lot of texture in the paper. It's pretty thick. We definitely want to stamp it 3 times to get a really, really nice coating of the black obsidian. It looks really, really good. Loving it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and move on. We're going to assemble the card so that we can move to the finishing stages of the card. Just love it. Oh, loving these colors. I've got my Tranquil Teal A2 sized card already cut and scored, and I'm going to use some of this tacky tape and just adhere the card front to the base of the cardstock. Oh, look at this texture. Look at that shimmer and shine. Just loving this just the way it is. But now I'm going to go ahead and move on and add the daisy embellishments. And this is going to give us a bit of a 3D look. It's also got these coordinating watercolors. And I'm creating that order of 3s here, that pattern of those daisies kind of falling from the upper right down to the bottom right. So it's very visually pleasing to the eye, and I just love the positioning of these embellishments. Okay, so I have the sequins. I have the Emerald City sequins from Gina K Designs. And the reason why I love these sequins for this card is that they've got the gold and the green in the sequin. So they're a perfect embellishment. They don't create a ton of height, but I'm just going to position them down on this card, and I'm using 5. So I've got an odd number of embellishments here to just kind of carry your eye through where I have the leaf elements going up. So we've got a little bit of movement here going from the bottom left up to the upper left, and then we've got all of this movement going on in the card. Just loving it. Okay, so here's a final look at the card and the inspiration over on the right. I love this drippy watercolor effect. I love that Cascade green color. It's a really nice companion to the Tranquil Teal. This is a super simple card that came together really quickly with a minimal amount of supplies. And we've got all this texture from the embossing powder and the metallics and the granulating watercolors. It's just so much fun and super easy to create. Okay, so the stamp set that I used today was Free to Flourish, and you can get this stamp set at Gina K Designs. You can also take a look at the link in the description and download this free sketch idea sheet with some fun ideas for creating cards with the Free to Flourish stamp set. And it's just a little gift of grace from me to you. So take a look at the link. Thanks so much for watching. Please consider sharing the joy by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. And I'm sharing more card and watercolor tutorial videos for your inspiration right here. So come on in and take a peek at my tutorials. I have a lot to share, and I'll see you next time.